All right, everyone. Happy Thursday. In the midst of exams. Oh, hope that goes well. Richest man on earth. Yeah, I've got a. Yeah, yeah. These fucking socialism for the rich and yeah, nothing for the rest of us peasants. It's good stuff. Good stuff. But after the 7th, I never have to think about the uni again. Oh, okay. You gonna graduate at that point? Shortly thereafter. That'll be awesome. Yeah, kick those. You're eating a bacon sandwich? Bacon. Nom, 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 nom. Bacon is so yummy. Yeah. Everything about uni again would be a dream. I just want to work at this point. Yeah, it's it can be a long process. And you graduate in July. Nice. What's your degree? It's for me, like when I was in college, it was kind of the similar way because I went to the technical college. I did 3 years solid in engineering. Cool. There should be good calls for that. It's good money. And I strode through my college, got done, and yeah, I wanted to get through with it. But I enjoyed my time in college. I enjoyed learning all the things that I wanted to learn, and I wanted to learn more, just never enough. If I could just stay in college for the rest of my life, that is what I would do because it's just end to the things that I want to learn. I can't tell you how many things I've considered going back to school for, from a degree in divinity, constitutional law, creative writing for novel writing, human factors, all sorts of stuff. The job market is shot working as a bartender at the moment. Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, once we pick up after this COVID thing, it should be a lot easier. Although even with engineering, you should be able to get some history of art. That would be cool. There's some very, very interesting stuff in there. I studied a little bit of that kind of analysis when I studied. I looked at the history of Christianity, which is something I studied a lot about. That also got into some of that sort of a thing, and it's pretty interesting when you get into the cultural and artistic understanding for what certain symbolism and stuff means in the way they do art. It is interesting. It is interesting with what little I've studied. It also doesn't help that I moved back to the countryside to be closer to family. Ah, okay. Depending on how the family relationships are, being closer there can be a good thing for going forward, better than economic degree to understand how our current society works. Well, there's benefits both ways. If you know how the current society works and why it's all fucked up, that could be useful. But yeah, how we got there is also important as well. How do we get to the point where the entire society is all fucked up? That's also kind of nice to know too, right? Yeah, it's pretty much every single school of knowledge is important in its own way, and it's none is less important than the others, depending on what we start talking about. But yeah, all knowledge is good. The more you learn, the better you're off. So I missed the last 2 stream days because I've been dealing with some family issues, specifically the daughter and I. I'm an introvert, an extreme introvert, and I need quiet. I need quiet and no drama. And the daughter is an extreme extrovert, and she doesn't ever listen. She doesn't do what she's told. It's just, and I'm working at home, and the child is at home, so it's kind of my own little personal nightmare. And it kind of all came to a thing here in this last week or so. Currently looking for some defense companies in the area. No idea, but I'll take who I can get this one. Oh yeah, just get your foot in the door and get going. That's all it takes. Just get started. So I've been, well, like when my daughter was first born, I was a fucking wreck. I need 2 introverts with me to handle 1 extrovert. Oh yeah, I mean it's Like just to prepare for spending time with my daughter takes me about a half an hour or more just to steel myself. Then I can handle about 20 or 30 minutes, and it takes me another like 2 hours just to recover. And I never get that. I never get that. It's very it makes me cranky because she's creating drama, yelling and screaming and crying, and it's not good. So like yeah, from a decade ago after she was born, I was a mess. If my daughter was okay as a baby, I could do everything just fine. But the very moment I even thought that she would be sad, I had a complete total emotional breakdown. First, I was in therapy for a year and a half after she was born, and it was the darkest, most horrific time of my life. So I've got some Laprazolum here, which is from back then, it's a antidepressant, I think. So I've started to take that a little bit. It's a decade old, so it's not gonna do all that well, but it kind of hollows me out a little bit. I'm on it now. So if I seem a little more subdued than I normally am, that's why. So I'm taking just one, which is like just 1 milligram. Tomorrow I'm gonna try 2 to see how that works. But antidepressant Laprazolum? I don't remember. All right, Laprazolum, Alprazam. I could say it was maybe it's Alprazam, Alprazolum, something like that. It's probably this. Xanax, hold on, let me find it. It doesn't sound right. Lorazepam. There we go. Lorazepam. Okay, that's the thing. Ativan, yeah, there we go. So this is it. Yeah, it's I got a whole bunch of them in here. I barely used any of them then, but I'm gonna start taking them now. So yeah, take one, helps me out a little bit, makes things a little easier. Yeah, it's when God, a decade ago, after my daughter was born, and I took it, I felt like a zombie when I took it. I mean, it really just sucked me, just devoid of all emotion. This time around, it's not. It's just a mild reduction. Of course, it's it's been sitting there for a decade, so it's not quite working at its highest effectiveness. But it's yeah, doing something. So that's helping. So that's why I've been missing that's why I missed the last 2, and it's what I'm dealing with now. And yeah, hopefully this stuff will help get things to calm down. Somehow find a way to get the daughter to calm down and to consider listening. But anyhow, so that's me. All right. So just FYI. All right. So let us move on to some more interesting stuff. Since someone brought this up, let's go ahead and pop over to this first, because this is some good stuff. Works with mental health in NHS, and I'm getting flashbacks of having to test her on all these medications for her exams. Ah. It is totally the best system out there, right? It's yeah. This is just the fucking privilege these fuckers have. I mean, it's offensive. It is, and it's you know so much for capitalism being the best, right? And the free market and the competition of ideas, and Bezos lost out, so fuck that guy, right? Because that's the way it should be. But no, no, no. We got to give one of the rich boys, right? The one of the top 1% a little more money. Capitalism at its finest. Okay. This is from the 25th, a few days ago. This is from The Intercept. Senate preparing $10 billion bailout fund for Jeff motherfucking Bezos space firm. I think it's Blue Origin. Bezos' Blue Origin lost its bid for a major NASA contract to Elon Musk, therefore throw a temper tantrum against second place. But the Senate is ordering the agency to give a second one now. That's right. Second prize for billionaires is $10 billion. Good stuff. Now that Jeff Bezos' spaceflight company Blue Origin has lost a multi-billion dollar contract to Elon Musk's SpaceX, Congress is prepping the ground for Bezos to win a contract anyway. Consolation prize, ordering NASA to make not one but two awards. How do they do bids? Anything? I don't know how they do bids. I imagine they have, they have the RFPs out there and then people apply for them and then it kind of goes from there. Not sure. The county I work with, we have a program that we use. We put our RFPs out there and then anyone who's on the system can go ahead and put in bids for it. So I imagine NASA has something similar, although of course highly specialized for obviously what they do. The order would come through the Endless Frontier Act, a bill to beef up resources for science and technology research that's being debated on the Senate floor this week. An amendment was added to that legislation by Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat, Washington, to hand over $10 billion to NASA. Money to NASA is always good. Money that most likely would go to Blue Origin, a company that's headquartered in Cantwell's home state, of course. It's not a lot. I've covered this a little bit. NASA budget 2021. So it's this one says 23.3 billion. So yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, and they're Jesus Christ, the fucking privilege here is just so it's so offensive, right? So they increase the budget by 30% just to give more money to a billionaire, right? Yeah, that's fucking privilege. It just gets more and more offensive as we go here, people. Oh my God. Okay. Cantwell's amendment is no sure bet, though. Senator Bernie Sanders, Vermont, introduced a last-minute amendment Monday to eliminate the $10 billion. Okay, that does not make a lot of sense to me that we would provide billions and billions of dollars to a company. Thanks. She brought me some taco food stuff. Looks like they go to Blue Origin, a company that's okay. I got lost here. That we would provide billions of dollars to a company owned by the wealthiest guy in America, Sanders told The Intercept on Tuesday. Okay, that's good. The Bezos space company had been competing against SpaceX for a contract to put astronauts on the moon, the first such trip since 1972, but lost the bidding process with a price tag twice that of SpaceX. What? NASA announced the award to Elon Musk-owned company last month. So SpaceX is half, and Bezos is potentially getting a freaking consolation prize of $10 billion. Oh my God, dude, this is so bad. So bad. It might be used for getting on the moon, or at least some experimental flight or something. We don't know exactly sure what it'd be used for. Maybe it's just a fucking, billionaire handout for, hey, you're cool, take some money. Cantwell's measure wouldn't rescind the grant to SpaceX, but would create an additional contract that Bezos' company would be in line to win. A third company, Dynetics, had also bid for the moonshot, but the author of the new amendment offers strong suggestion of which company it's likely to benefit. It's like 67% live paycheck to paycheck, but sure, let's round this 190 billion net worth up to 200 billion. Such nice. Well, right, you don't want them to have, math problems or rounding problems. All this money they have, they might chip a nail or have to get a new calculator or something. Well, exactly. Let's just round it up a bit more to 1 trillion. I like the way you think. That's exactly right. That's how ludicrous it really is, and that's the sort of conversation that someone there was thinking, right? God. Cantwell told NASA's incoming administrator, former Senator Bill Nelson, that she was surprised at the way the award unfolded before introducing the legislation to add a new one. Now, why the fuck would they be adding legislation to add more contracts? That's honestly, that should be NASA's domain, right? It's like the Cantwell's interfering with how NASA's actually operating, which is kind of fucking ridiculous. But think about the new jobs Bezos will create. Right? I think there needs to be redundancy or multiple contractors in case one fails, she told Todd Nelson at his confirmation hearing, and it has been clear this process can't be redundancy later. It has to be redundancy now. Okay, there's something to be said for that. Now, there's also the concept that assuming that SpaceX has multiple launchers, in case one does explode or go down, that they can still do it. I don't know if that's what they're doing. If not, that's definitely something they should be doing. The measure has been attached to the Endless Frontier Act as a part of the manager's amendment and authorizes $10.03 billion through the year 2026 for the Moon program. Authorization alone does not fund the program, and Congress would still need to appropriate the money, which is wrong, or the executive would need to find other appropriate funds. Now, this here is completely incorrect. At least in general, if it passes into law, it's automatically funded by normal. And this is just, need to quote, find the money is just by virtue of how fucked up Congress is. And it's a tool to make sure that in order to find money that they get to screw people over, engaging in austerity and cutting Social Security and that sort of a thing. There's like two or three rules that Congress needs to get fucking rid of because they make zero sense. Isn't this against competition laws, though? Did they fund SpaceX? If so, they also need to help Bezos, in my opinion. Well, it's not anti-competitive, right? Because they had a bid for contracts, and one person wins the bid, and that was SpaceX, and so there's nothing anti-competitive about it, right? They just didn't get the contract because their cost to do the same thing was double that what SpaceX's was. I mean, if they only need one contractor to do one thing, then it's not really anti-competitive to not hire everyone else, right? Accidental message. It's okay, man. It's okay. The bill is currently on the Senate floor and has broad bipartisan support. A procedural vote last week passed by a 71-27 margin, and Senate Democrat leaders are eyeing a Thursday vote for final passage, after which it would need to move through the House of Representatives. Blue Origin spent, here we go. Blue Origin spent $625,000 lobbying the Senate in the first 3 months of 2021. All right. So they put in $650,000 and they get out $10 billion. Tell me that's not a fucking return on investment. Wish I could get returns like that. If you were paying everyone equal amounts anyway, why not abolish private space companies and only have like NASA? Well, okay, so I haven't quite gotten that in depth into my into my interstellar policies. But ultimately, I mean, if we really wanted to do this the fastest way, yeah, get rid of private companies and have all the national governments work together into one joint unified space program and start developing things. Then you could get private contractors involved in mostly doing research and development and making stuff for NASA as as a contractor of NASA. That would be one way to do it. And honestly, on the larger scale of things, where you've got multiple countries working on the same project, funding it, and the tech and the brain trust being involved, as well as the independent contractors being a part of the process, you'll get so much done so much quickly. Then we've got like Gateway Foundation, and China and Russia are trying to put up space stations. That's a fucking waste of time, because they're all recreating the wheel. If they're all working together to create one huge space station using all this technology available to all these countries, life would be so much better. Usually motivated by profits, even Earth exploration was driven by looking for profits, other trade. Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But typically, the large scale, high capital investment is done by the government first, and that's the way it has been with space. And then once the basic technology and stuff is done, then it gets opened up to private private companies in order to do it. But the governments are the ones who go in first to pave the way. Then the contractors and private companies can go in and do their part. That's the way it's been with space. That's how it worked with cell phones and GPS and all that sort of stuff. That's all government funded, government created, and then the private companies got in on it afterwards. All right, just a second. I'm gonna try this. It's a taco of sorts with jalapenos and stuff. Can't see it too well. Almost as capitalism is a super inefficient system. It's not even hard to grasp how resource sharing would greatly benefit. Yeah, no, that's exactly right, and that's why it's so, God. There's just so much waste in competition. I mean, just all the money spent hiding patents, paying for anti-competitive practices, paying for advertising and all that sort of shit. It's such a waste of time and money. What's the profit incentive to go to the moon? Publicity maybe, or some other terrestrial. Yeah, so in the scheme of things, going to the moon, moon bases are going to be huge. Most jobs are bullshit jobs, exactly right. It's going to act as a way station at some point. I talk about a way to approach this in my interstellar policies, but they can start creating solar panels to create a moon base there, right? And refilling, I guess they can take out oxygen from the ground, so you can have oxygen refilling stations for spaceships and stuff like that. Going to the moon will be it'll be nice. It'll be a very nice way station to get to the rest of the world. It uses refueling and stuff like that. All right, one moment. If you want to see my concepts for path for interstellar humanity, talk about that in here. I have one more moment. So yeah, Blue Origin spent $625,000 lobbying the Senate. According to the lobbying disclosure records, among that spending was $50,000 to a team of lobbyists at a firm called Clark Hill that would specifically focus on the moon landing program. The team includes John Culberson, a former member of the House from Texas and a one-time chair of the House Appropriations Subcommittee that covers science policy. The White House also appointed Culberson last year to the National Space Council Users Advisory Group that makes policy recommendations to NASA. As economics students, I really struggle to find meaning in my job. Yep, almost makes me depressed. I wish I did something like engineering or medicine to benefit humanity. Even yeah, no, that's yeah, I agree completely. What is Bezos and space bailout? Yeah, I agree. Look at the book Donut Economics. Maybe that'll help you. That'll give you a guide. I talk about that in here. This was a powerful book for me. If you kind of like the way I look at economics, this might give you a way to deal with that. Maybe to focus that. Bezos, he lobbied and got potentially a $10 billion extra contract for his lobbying efforts because SpaceX won. Yeah, space station storm. Yeah, that's gonna be a huge thing. But they can make the stuff on the ground and they can bring it back up because it's much easier to launch stuff from the moon into orbit than it is elsewhere. So an idea would be they could literally have a space elevator going straight down from an orbital station, and they could bring everything up from a space elevator from the surface of the moon and send them on. Oh yeah. Social worker or cleaning environment. Yeah, those are all very good things. And you know, going into finance, it's one of those diseases of capitalism, right? Because that's where the money is. Getting in finance, getting in insurance, getting in, you know, banking and stuff like that. That's where a crap load of money is. It doesn't do anyone any fucking good because it doesn't do anything, but it's a way to make a living. Most IT jobs, yeah, feel sense as well, right? And that's because it's all about making the money instead of doing something that actually means something to humanity. So finding that one project you want to get on that actually makes a difference in people's life can be very difficult. Engineering how to make more people click ads on websites, exactly. Yeah, oh yeah. That'll make you a lot of money too. Get those clicks. Get those clicks. Yeah, I do. I have a degree in computer programming, a bachelor's, and I do basically some website administration stuff for a small county government here in the United States. Front end stuff is fun. HTML and CSS was my first love. Actually, my second love actually. Computer programming was my first love, and then front end development, CSS, HTML is it's amazing stuff. Yeah. But it's definitely changed a lot since I first got into it. Changed a whole lot. All right. Only heard of it. Next.js. Last month's award to SpaceX did come as a surprise, according to a report by the Washington Post, which is owned by Bezos. NASA awarded the deal to SpaceX, owned by one of the richest men in the world. She's taking my juice. I can't. This is up my thing. That we need unemployment for capitalism. Right. When you get into economics, the even in MMT, one of the reasons for inflation is to drive unemployment. So for some reason, unemployment is needed. There's like the magic number of like 3 to 5% of unemployment, which is required by some delusion, something like that. Yeah, it's ridiculous. If unemployment is required, then UBI should be required as well. 3D printing superconductors last year and was great. Oh, that sounds like fun. That sounds useful. Useful and fun. I have a friend who has a 3D printer, an older one, and he does some stuff with it. But that's the closest I've gotten to it. All right. SpaceX owned by one of the richest men in the world, quote, to preserve competitive environment. After the loss, Blue Origin and Dynetics filed protests with the Government Accountability Office, which currently remained open, but Congress seemed to want to bypass the watchdog with a multi-billion-dollar handout to NASA to award more contracts. Asked by The Intercept if the agency views Cantwell's amendment as a means to override its down-select decision, NASA spokesperson Monica Witt declined to comment, citing the ongoing litigation. Yeah, stepping on toes is what she's doing. Meanwhile, the fight over the NASA contract is the latest development in the growing contest between two of the world's richest men for government contracts. In May 2019, for example, SpaceX filed lawsuits in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims against Air Force's decision to exclude it from a $2.3 billion in funding for space launch services. The funding instead went to United Launch Alliance, Northrop Grumman, and Blue Origin. So wages stay and don't go up, and if wages go up too much, so does inflation, because everyone has more disposable income. Okay. Now, is that theoretical, or is that actually proven by something? 'Cause a lot of what you'll find in economics is it's all based on a on kind of a cult of assumptions that don't necessarily track. Yeah, the Donut Economics book goes over kind of all those things that it's it's a self-referential cult. Yeah, that's the question. Does the data actually follow? That's what matters. Yeah. Starting to studying economics and then getting radicalized while studying it must be quite a rough experience. Oh yeah, the more you find out how fucked up it is, it's enraging. Yeah, the more you understand how the system is broken, it just rage is all any of us should be feeling. The truth should always radicalize you under capitalism. By supply and demand. Okay. Now, we've talked about this sort of a subject before a little bit, right? How that the corporations like this want the people to feel like we are the problem or we are the solution towards climate change. Even though it's just like the top 100 companies are responsible, or top 10% of the people are responsible for like 80% of the actual pollution. So the more they can shift it to us, the less we're going to start looking at the people who are really, really causing the problem. So of course, ExxonMobil is all that, heavily ethical company, right? We can trust them. We can trust their word, right? A new study reveals how the oil company used cutting-edge propaganda to focus on fossil fuel consumption. Whoa. There we go. Yeah. Thanks for finding this. This is exactly what I was talking about. You always find the things when I need them here. So yeah, just 100 companies responsible for 71% of global emissions, study finds. Yeah, this is exactly it, and I need to put this in my policy somewhere. Thanks for finding that and sharing that, because this is super important, and this is kind of why my policies concentrate on a lot of business changes. You had to save in your docs. Okay, good for you. You do have to be careful, though. I see so many people completely washing their hand of climate change using these stats. There's still some. Yeah, no, I agree completely. I agree completely. It's we still got to try and do our part, but we need to realize that we're not the problem. They are. And that, of course, the way they make society reliant on plastic bags and plastic this and that sort of the other thing as a way to cut cost is a part of the problem. It's that, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. So the ways that they cut costs and pass it on to you, give you the plastic and the garbage stuff, is part of the problem. That it's a cultural, it's a socioeconomic problem with the companies themselves that we are victims of. Remember, the power is always on the consumer's hands. If you don't pay, they must change. Yeah, and that doesn't always work, because unless you have enough people to work en masse to do something about it, one or two people don't mean anything in the scheme of things. It requires a very large scale, a large scope movement to do that, like getting your city or county to divest, right? Or your state or your country. It requires a lot to get any traction to make any difference on these sorts of things. But that's what we should be doing, right? And that's kind of what I want to how I kind of want to approach things with school board, trying to get our school board involved in activism and getting rid of these businesses that are not working well and using businesses that are more ethical. No ethical consumption under capitalism doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue more substantial yeah, exactly right. And even within the core of economics, it's not possible to have an informed choice, because informed choice under economics requires an informed consumer, and which means he has all the data they need to make a decision, and that's not possible. We don't know where it's made, how it's made. It's how ethical it is. Is it sustainable? Is it using sustainable energy, right? So the delusion of an informed consumer within economics doesn't exist. Hey Tadots, how you doing? Welcome. Holy macaroni. All right, so we'll go over here. All right. To understand why ExxonMobil has been so effective at shaping the U.S. narrative about climate change in the U.S. for some 40 years, look no further than the words of one of the company's communications strategists, Mobile Vice President of Public Affairs, Herbert Schmertz. He just sounds like a great name there. Your objective is to wrap yourself in the good phrases while sticking your opponents with the bad ones, he wrote in 1986. Of course. It's the war of labels, right? From the 1970s through the 1980s, most of the company's PR efforts focused on casting doubt on the scientific consensus that burning fossil fuels was warming the planet. But by the mid-2000s, it was taking a more sophisticated, nuanced approach. Energy-saving consumers can make a real difference, it said in 2007, listing ways consumers can be smart about electricity use. Heat and cool your home efficiently and improve your gas mileage to address climate change. Another ad in 2008 looks to the auto industry. It is important we reduce greenhouse gas emissions too. Improving the efficiency of the vehicles people driving is one way to do so. Yeah, so they're pointing to all other different ways to reduce energy, but not actually looking at themselves as being the prime culprit, i.e., not shifting away from fossil fuels and into sustainable energy. There are many examples in ExxonMobil's advertising materials and other documents right up to 2019, all doing the same thing, deflecting attention away from the oil company's role in fueling climate change by supplying fossil fuels and turning attention toward consumer demand for and dependency on its products. We now have a comprehensive view of this strategy thanks to a new peer-reviewed study by Harvard Research Associate Jeffrey Supran and Harvard Science historian Naomi Oreskes in the journal One Earth. In a painstaking analysis, they showed how hard the oil giant has worked to keep the conversation about climate solutions focused on the consumer, effectively individualizing responsibility for the problem. Never before had it been proven that fossil fuel propaganda is demonstrably one source of where this consumer and demand-focused mindset has originated from, Supran told Vox. Nothing more relaxing than giant companies with huge influence doing everything to stay in power. Yeah, I know, right? It's just... yeah, the more you learn about how fucked the system is, the more enraged you get, because they have the money, they have the influence, they have the power to do all of this stuff, and there's very little that us peasants can do about it directly. Blaming the individual user rather than the producers is a well-worn tactic of other industries with dangerous products, including tobacco and firearms, right? In case of fossil fuel products, individualizing the responsibility for climate change obfuscates the responsibility of companies like Exxon, one of 20 companies, responsible for 1/3 of energy-related global carbon emissions since 1965, to extract fewer fossil fuels and shift to cleaner technologies. And according to Oreskes and Supra, not only has this messaging strategy allowed Exxon to downplay its role in the climate crisis, it also continued to be used to undermine climate litigation, regulation, and activism. Now, again, we looked at Gaming Mind shared this video a while ago on how Amazon and Google were working with fossil fuel industries to try and increase the efficiency of their extraction. Oh my God, I was so pissed. See, that's exactly what should not be done. Amazon, Google, they should be using their computer resources not with the fossil fuel people, but with the sustainable energy people to try and make that happen. I mean, that's what needs to be done. But of course, why do they work with fossil fuels? Because that's where the money is. And they promote themselves as being carbon neutral. As way. Yeah. Oh, totally. Exactly. And that's, oh God. There's so much good that could be done by the companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, going and say, okay, sustainable energy. Let's throw our resources behind this and make this go as fast and as efficient as possible. But no. That won't make us money. Again, it's that tension issue within methods of exchange, right? Either it's profit for our tribe, our business, or it is do what's best for humanity. That's always why everything is going to fail. First of its kind analysis of Exxon's public messaging, Supran and Oreskes use a trove of documents that have that have combed through in past research, namely a 2017 paper that found ExxonMobil internally acknowledging its product's role in climate change while publicly casting doubt on the science. Of course. Starting in the late 1970s, the company ran regular advertisements in the New York Times. The researchers looked at those ads as well as more recent reports aimed at investors through 2019 for a total of 212 documents that provide a solid chronology of how the oil company has communicated with the public on climate science. Ah! Hold on, sorry. Headphones fell. The early ads took a skeptical stance on climate science, but in the 2000s they started to emphasize the uncertainty of risks rather than the consensus of man-made warming. When ExxonMobil did acknowledge the need to reduce pollution, it disproportionately talked about how much it was doing to address the demand side of the equation rather than addressing the obvious half, increasing supply. When Suprin ran its algorithm to pick up the most frequently used terms and topics in the papers, he was surprised at what they found. The company's messaging was largely consistent in advertisements up to 2009 and in reports up to 2019. Statistically overusing certain language like risk and demand to hammer home these themes. 1997, the company touted helping customers scale back their emissions of carbon dioxide, while the next year it encouraged the public to show a little voluntary can do. A decade later, in 2008, an ad suggested the cars and trucks we drive aren't just vehicles, they're opportunities to solve the world's energy and environmental challenges. Okay, well that is true. But had they decided to shift off of fossil fuels and shift to sustainable energy, that would have made it significantly less challenging. Throughout this time, ExxonMobil discussed the growing fossil fuel demand as an inevitability, saying things like oil and gas will be essential to meeting demand through 2030, and fossil fuels must be relied upon to meet society's immediate near-term needs. Yeah, and you're not working towards solving that problem, you bunch of fuckheads. The company acknowledged its own culpability in obscure academic journals and internal memos. One 1982 internal memo writes what the company never publicly admits, that the connection between Exxon's major businesses and the role of fossil fuel combustion in contributing to the increase in atmospheric CO2. The other trend the Harvard researchers note is how the company shifted from a fossil fuel savior frame in the mid-2000s. 2007 company ad notes increasing prosperity in the developing world will be the main driver of the great energy demand and consequently rising CO2 emissions, which positions the company as another passive bystander in global warming. Yeah, and we right, I talk about this exact thing, right? The second and third world countries are following the same path that the United States did, tearing through fossil fuels as a way to get to great amount of wealth and prosperity. And that is exactly what we need to prevent the second and third world countries from doing. So we need to hammer sustainable energy and throw trillions of dollars at these emerging markets and say, get your asses off fossil fuels, shift to tidal, geothermal. Here's some of our people, here's some of our tech, just fucking fix it so we can, so we can have you jump past this part of the demographic transitions and get into at least first world status infrastructure when it comes to energy, so you're not contributing to climate change. That's what needs to be done. That's what needs to be on Biden's fucking climate change fucking policy. It's in my policy. I'll go ahead and share it here. In case you guys want some light reading to put yourself to sleep. All right, one moment. I'll take another bite or two. Bill Nye, yes. Is he mentioned in here? I'm okay with him. He's not perfect, but he does some good stuff. You're looking at my policies. That's what you're doing. Tacos were good, but messy. All right. As for comment on the study, Exxon's spokesperson Casey Norton called it a conflict of interest, alleging that Orescus is on retainer for Sher Edling, one of the law firms that has sued Exxon, and that the research was partially funded by the Rockefeller Family Fund. Okay, that's interesting, which is also involved in litigation against oil companies. So why would Rockefeller, weren't they one of the oil companies? Interesting. This research is clearly part of a litigation strategy against ExxonMobil and other energy companies, Norton said. ExxonMobil supports the Paris Climate Agreement, which doesn't, of course they support it because it doesn't fucking mean anything. I mean, I have it in my policies. Sure, let's sign the damn thing, but it doesn't mean jack shit because it has no teeth to it. There's not binding. There's no enforcement mechanism. Again, that's another reason why Biden wants to do it, because it doesn't mean anything. See, we did this, right? We did this. It's a win for the environment, even though it doesn't do anything. It's more that, democratic performativeness. Democratic political theater. And is working to reduce company emissions and helping customers reduce their emissions while working on near lower emission technologies and advocating for effective policies. Superintendent Orescus, in response, said Sher Edling played no role in the paper we published today, nor in any other academic work we have done, charging that ExxonMobil's statement was purposely misleading. Well, of course it was. The problem with climate shame. Shaming individuals has pretty much always been a part of the climate discourse. Political leaders focus on recycling and consumption of plastics rather than banning production, and now flight shame is taken off as a way to discourage plane travel to tackle the rising footprint of transportation emissions. Right. And this is going to be a big deal. We need to start figuring out how the hell to deal with flights and to reduce the CO2 footprint, because that is a huge part of the CO2 footprint we have. Now, there are a bunch of electric planes coming out, even some larger scale ones, which might be one way to do that. Blimps are a way of doing it too. I've got one article here looking at that. But yeah, that's going to be a big problem. And then, of course, we've got all of the SpaceX, right? And all those rockets launching things into space. That greatly increases CO2 into the environment. I mean, there are other ways that we can do this, get things into space that don't necessarily require as much rocket fuel. And again, we look at my interstellar policies. You can look at, you do like an Atlas pillar, you get a space elevator way up here, or an orbital station, space elevator, Atlas pillar going all the way up, and you can have a sky hook, pick things up that way. Or there's a way to magnetically launch things into space. It's not so good for people because the level of the speed that it requires and the acceleration doesn't work so well. But that could be possible too. Use magnetic rail, launch things up, and then they could be picked up by a sky hook or space elevator or some other stuff like that. But shame has a dark side. It can be a distraction that lets keep perpetrators of climate change off the hook. Supran and Oreskes don't have a precise measure of the impact of ExxonMobil's marketing has had on the public discourse. Their methodology doesn't go that far, but there's plenty of anecdotal evidence that policymakers and the media overemphasize personal responsibility instead of systemic political and economic change. Of course, because the mainstream media serves the corporation. So of course, that is exactly what they're going to do, right? At the grassroots level, people get accused of being hypocrites all the time for flying, driving, using plastics, also derived from fossil fuels. Supran said, and research from Georgia State University shows how shame messaging can backfire. In a 2020 paper, it showed that in some cases, being told to drive less or change your diet can make people less willing to want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions because it impacts them directly. It's because it has to be an individual choice. And of course, it's very difficult for individuals to make changes, especially when society is telling you that out of spite, yeah, fuck you guys, right? Especially when the systemic and structural and the systems and structure that's in place makes it very difficult for them to do that, or it even rewards them for doing it by making just life easier, right? Or yes, just not doing it out of spite because the fucking companies are the ones who need to make the changes, not us. Yeah. ExxonMobil wasn't the first oil company to push these narratives. The very notion of a personal carbon footprint, for example, was first popularized in 2004 and 6 by oil firm BP as part of its 100 million per year Beyond Petroleum U.S. media campaign. Supran and Oreskes write, but ultimately these narratives hamstring us and they put blinders on us to the systemic nature of the climate crisis and the importance of taking collective action to address the problem. This is exactly right. It's because it's the system that needs to change to solve this. Again, what we the people do, it doesn't going to make that much of a difference. It's our tax subsidies going to fossil fuel industries. It's ending those, increasing taxation on them, and giving tax grants and bonuses to those companies that are shifting to sustainable energy. And of course, ending all grants for all permits for fracking and oils and stuff like that, and giving no more new permits and all that sort of stuff. There's ways that we can do this systemically and structurally to force these companies to shift to sustainable energy, but unfortunately that is what it requires, and that's difficult to do because the corporations own the government. The real-world implications of the Exxon docs. It's useful to have some statistical rigor backing up the observations of many academics, activists, and journalists that by emphasizing demand, oil companies can play the part of innocent bystanders feeding a global hunger for their products. But the more consequential implications for this research may be in the courts. Major oil companies like ExxonMobil are currently facing an onslaught of lawsuits around the world, charging that they have broken the law by pushing misinformation and thwarting climate action. The Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia Law School counted 884 climate cases in 2017, had doubled to 1,500 cases by 2020 in 38 countries. Exxon is not the only subject of all these lawsuits. Yeah, because fuck them, right? Just recently, New York City filed a new lawsuit against ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, and American Petroleum Institute for violating the city's consumer protection laws and others. Another sign the wave of litigation is not slowing down. Cool. Yeah, they should be sued into non-existence. Well, like my policies say, all right, I get president. All these fucking businesses have 1 year to create a 5-year plan to shift to sustainable energy. Those that don't, the country takes over. We nationalize their infrastructure, and all those fuckers go to jail. They've had decades to figure out how to shift to sustainable energy. They're not doing it because they're making money off it and murdering humanity through ecocide by doing that. First, the researchers note that ExxonMobil may be mounting a clever defense against these lawsuits with its greenwashing. One of its defenses actually cited the same logic that appears again and again in its advertising, that climate risks are common knowledge and the company bears no control over how people choose to live. Suprin and Reskus note the example. In 2018, arguing in defense of 5 oil companies, including ExxonMobil Corp., against a lawsuit brought by California cities seeking climate damages, Chevron lawyer Theodore Boutreau Jr. offered his interpretation of the IPCC's latest report. I think the IPCC does not say it's the production and extraction of oil that is driving these emissions, it's the energy use. Oh my fucking God. I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, part of it is not wrong. Right, but if you're not taking it out of the ground, they can't fucking use it, you jackass. It's economic activity that creates demand for energy. If there's no oil, then there's no fucking demand. It's the way people are living their lives. The judge's dismissal of the case accepted this framing. Would it really be fair to now ignore our own responsibility in the use of fossil fuels and place blame for global warming on those who supplied what we demanded? Well, if you, see, this is fucking stupid. Had they shifted to sustainable energy, that's what we would be demanding. We can only ask for what we have the option of getting, right? If this is the supply we have, this is what we have to demand. This is messed up. They should not have been able to get away with that. Even if plaintiffs proves their case, fossil fuel companies can invoke affirmative defenses, as tobacco companies often have, such as common knowledge and assumption of the risk. These respectively argue that the plaintiff had engaged in activities such as smoking that involved obvious and widely known risks, and 2, that the plaintiff knew about and voluntarily undertook the risk. As Brandt explains it, if there was a risk, even though unproven, it nonetheless must be the smoker's risk. Since the smoker had been fully informed of the controversy, the industry had secured the best of both worlds. So honestly, these guys just need to be taken to the Hague for crimes against the environment and crimes against humanity for all of this. Second implication is how their research can become a useful tool for climate activists and policymakers looking to hold ExxonMobil responsible. What Suprin and Reskus do in their paper, according to Carol Muffett, president of the Center for International Environmental Law, is proof quantitatively what has been qualitatively evident for years. Oil and gas companies insulate themselves from public scrutiny and regulatory action even as the climate crisis accelerated. And any proof that oil companies were insulating themselves from climate policies while misleading the public is likely to become useful fodder in the courtroom. This evidence will matter not only in the court of public opinion, but in courts of justice around the world faced with questions of industry accountability, culpability, and potential liability for mounting climate impacts, Muffet said. I mean, we've known that these companies have known since, the 70s that this is a thing? Message Suprin hopes people take from his work isn't that your actions don't matter, but governments need to take responsibility and hold the major polluters accountable. True statement. And those policies include a broader mix of solutions that limit the fuels Exxon can extract, axing pipeline projects for transportation, limiting its opportunity to export around the world, and even make companies pay for damages caused to vulnerable communities. That sounds very similar to what my policies are. You drop the big metal hammer of go fuck yourself all over them. I agree completely. This is cutting-edge propaganda coming from an industry with 100 years of experience in pioneering the art of public relations, he said. People should be aware of what they're subject to, because otherwise it gets into our bones and without us even knowing where it came from. All right, there you go. More love for the fossil fuel industry. Good stuff. Good stuff. Bastards. All right, so let's check out. All right, and of course, the U.S. is one of the largest polluters in the world as well because they don't have to conform to environmental standards or anything like that. So the U.S. military also 1 year to create a 5-year plan to correct that, have their technology sustainable. We signed the Paris Climate Accord, even though it doesn't matter. Climate change will be classified as a national security issue and a global security issue and a human extinction level event. The U.S. government will have 1 year to create a 5-year plan to combat climate change in the U.S. and worldwide, and which should also include the utilization of various national guards, massive use of technology such as drones, investing in technology which removes carbon dioxide from the air. There's a project using algae doing that, which is awesome. Launching a swarm of microsatellites over the poles to reduce the amount of infrared that gets to our planet. Where is I've got it here somewhere. Fossil. There we go. Fossil fuels. Okay, so we will make the money back from this below process in 10 years due to the healthcare savings alone by reducing pollution, increasing efficiency, and saving the environment. Okay, so fossil fuel industry. They'll be held accountable for knowing about and suppressing climate change data and knowledge for decades, destroying the environment for profit, suppressing technologies that could put them out of business, and their owners and managers should be tried for crimes against nature. An immediate stop to all fracking processes. The proprietary patents should be released. Current applications for pipelines axed. Corporate subsidies and tax breaks should be terminated. They'll receive a 20% increase in corporate and management taxes. Their financial actions will have to be approved by a government agency in order to prevent bypassing them or avoiding or to avoid sabotaging the company, so they did not have to deal with it. They'll have to create They have 1 year to create a 5-year plan to shift to sustainable energy. Completely remediate all environmental damage caused directly or indirectly over the entirety of their operation, all their subsidiaries. Create a job training plan to work in the sustainable and other related industries, all in preparation to be classified as a public utility, or else the managers and key decision makers shall face lengthy prison sentences, no compensations, including golden parachutes and fines for not complying and all that sort of stuff. This is the level of radical action that we need to be taking in order to put these fuckers in the ground and to help start fighting against climate change. This is what we need to be doing. All right, questions, comments, suggestions on that? Nope. All right. Canada needs to nationalize its transit system. I'm liking this concept. The demise of Greyhound Canada underscores the market's inability to meet the transit needs of Canadians. It's past time for national publicly owned rail and bus service operated in the public interest. Yeah, and again, this could be all electrified as well. We haven't watched this one yet, but there's one by Japan? I'm pretty sure it's China. They've got this all electric bus thing that operates off a digital track. That's the sort of thing that we could be looking at doing. Got high-speed rail and electric buses everywhere. All right. In the early 1930s, a young graduate of McGill University sat down for an interview with Sir Edward Beatty, then the president of Canadian Pacific Railways, as part of his application for a scholarship at Oxford. Beatty, as the story goes, asked the young applicant, What would be your first step if you were elected prime minister? To which he replied, I'd nationalize the Canadian Pacific. The applicant in question was the young socialist organizer David Lewis, who perhaps on the strength of his chutzpah alone, was duly awarded a scholarship and soon after began his studies at Oxford. As leader of the NDP for some 40 years later, Lewis would campaign to turn his retort into a national policy during the 1972 federal election. Assassin's Creed. What's your take on what's happening in Palestine? Israel is a genocidal terrorist organization. That's my take on it. Israel bad. Super mega ultra bad. Give you my... Yeah, here we go. Here's my policies here for them. I'll take a look. Lewis would campaign to turn his retort into a national policy during the 1970 federal election, the privatization mania that would sweep much of the world in the following decades, because the 80s having not yet arrived to stigmatize the concept of public ownership and render it the anachronism it's often assumed to be today. Good take. I'm glad you approve. Yeah, BDS the shit out of them. Freeze all of the accounts for the government and for the people in charge. Yeah, and then BDS the shit out of them. Then you send an international organization like NATO in there to protect Palestine and go from there. Intervening years have, to say the least, offered a mountain of evidence to strengthen the classical socialist case for nationalization of sectors like transit. The market failing again and again to provide decent service or meet basic standards of efficiency. The privatization of British Rail, to take an obvious and famous example, has been an unmitigated disaster. The business of getting around the United Kingdom by train today being both complicated and expensive. The cost of a single ticket from London to Manchester more than tripled between 1995 and 2013. Yeah, and of course, it's always about profit, right? It's always about the profit. Things will always get worse because they need to make more profit. Thanks to New Zealand's 1980s experiment in privatization, Auckland's transit system is a morass of competing companies contracted by local governments to provide bus, rail, and ferry services. Tickets are similarly expensive. Transfer between sections owned by different firms is impossible, and bus routes are circuitous. As the expat Canadian economist Jim Stanford put it in 2010, the top priority becomes ensuring that a private company reaches profit targets, not picking up people who need a ride. That's exactly right. And ideally, right, and then we take a look at this from the standpoint of a resource-based economy. If you centrally planned the trains and the buses, or even some of the like automated Uber sort of a thing, so that you want to go from here to there, and then it'll arrange your route for you. This is your train, you'll take this bus here, and then your Uber like thing will pick you up here to there. So you don't need 10 apps to get around the country. You've got one app and it'll get you everywhere you want to go. As Canada's own experience shows, however, the failure of privatized transit can sometimes take other forms. Most recently, outright failure. Last week, Greyhound Canada announced the permanent closure of every bus route in the country, eliminating one of the only options for affordable intercity transit across the world's second largest national landmass. Now, this failure is most likely due to COVID, right? So that's, I'm sure, a big part of this. While the immediate catalyst was undeniably the months-long suspension of service due to COVID, like I just said, the company has struggled for years, and its collapse hardly comes as a surprise. In 2018, it ceased operations in Western Canada, which had once covered some 11,000 kilometers and serviced around 2 million trips per year. As writer Alex Zhu remarked at the time, Canada now has a patchwork network of intercity bus services composed of individual separate bus lines. Those systems often don't interconnect with each other, rendering transfer almost impossible. Moreover, bus schedules are usually far between, not keeping up with the growth of the population. As a result, the current intercity bus service fails to reach many Canadians or serve them adequately. With Greyhound's final demise, this situation has gone from bad to worse, with people in already underserviced northern and remote communities in particular soon to find it near impossible to travel significant distances with convenience or ease. Very likely, governments will opt to respond by offering up market solutions. The province of Ontario, for example, has already proposed to start deregulating the inter-community bus industry in the next few months. A move almost certain to result in higher ticket prices, less consistent service, many of the inefficiencies visible in privatized transit boondoggles everywhere. Yeah, and privatization is basically almost never the right answer, and that is in my policies. Socialize it, nationalize it, and move on from there. The Amalgamated Transit Union has proposed a much better way in the form of a nationalized public intercity bus service. That idea could be taken still further by expanding it to rail, even potentially discounted air travel. By crude market metrics, a nationalized transit service would probably be an abysmal failure. Canada is, after all, a huge place, and it's difficult to imagine how even the most dynamic public sector alternative could possibly be profitable while also being affordable and available to those who need it. The point is that we shouldn't have to. So, and that's why nationalization is going to be so important, because, once you pass the law and it becomes a federal program, it just gets paid for. You don't have to worry about, paying for it with taxation, because that's not the point. Federal taxes don't pay for anything. In federal law, you pass the law and the money's there and you pay for it. And that's the same thing for like the United States Postal Service here in the United States, right? It's not about making a profit. It's about providing a service to the people. Like magic. That's exactly right. That's exactly the way it is. You pass the law, and then someone goes to a computer, adds some zeros, and then boom, your money's there, and you spend it. Viable clan member, how you doing? By crude market metrics, a nationalized transit service. Okay, we heard that, blah, blah. Canadians, regardless of background, income, or postal code, should be able to get around their city with ease on bus routes and railways owned and operated in the public good. I'm against most forms of government spending and increase of taxation. Well, that's gonna suck. Definitely on the wrong channel for that. All right, man. Game Mine, thank you so much for showing up, man. Have a great night and get some sleep. It's good to see you again. So, yeah, there's this. I'll go and share this again so you have access to it. They're viable clan member. All right, then we'll move on to this one here. Actually, let's not do that. Let's go over here. There's one. Here, let's bring this down here, since we got it brought up. Yeah, all right, we'll do this one here. If you're rich enough to afford an electric car, why would you want a random smelly person sit next to you? Well, you wouldn't. But the problem is, why is that person allowed to be rich? That is the problem. That is the problem. All right, so this is allowed, exactly. You're gonna love my economic policies here, dude. You're gonna love this. It's gonna blow your face right off. Why did you say that in a German accent? Oh, it wasn't specific to an accent or anything. It was just got me excited. Got me excited. The idea that deficit spending is a burden on our children is the dumbest propaganda. Too soon? Every time the government sells a bond, it creates a liability for the government, but also creates an asset for whoever bought it. I'm assuming this is going to get into MMT sort of stuff, which is kind of why I'm going to read this. Again, this is from The Intercept. For decades, the Washington, D.C. a political class has condemned deficit spending as an act of selfishness. We're profligately throwing ourselves a party, then say, but paying for it with our credit cards, leaving our descendants to pick up the tab, which is totally fucking incorrect. This is what the Republicans and the Democrats both want you to believe. That way they can fuck you over, give money to the rich. I mean, it doesn't apply to giving money to socialism for the rich, right? It only applies to doing stuff for the people. That's when this sort of a talk actually matters. This is some of the most successful propaganda in U.S. history, when it is especially impressive given that it's also some of the silliest propaganda in U.S. history. The rhetoric subsided during the Trump administration. Of course, Republicans always deficit spend and they don't give a fuck about anything, right? Because Romney said that Reagan showed that deficits don't matter. But with the Democrat in the White House, who's proposing significant new spending, it's returned with a vengeance, as it always does. We should use every tool we have to stop bankrupting our kids and our grandkids. Fuck you, troll. Ted Cruz is a fucking troll. Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee has decried the coming debt burden on our children and grandchildren, and this doesn't exist. Ted Cruz is a legendary shitface. Yes, he is a legend. Legendary shitface. Oh god, here's some of the stupid bullshit. This isn't a thing. This isn't a thing. This is a lie. Ah! Go back. I don't know who I like him more or... Oh, Mitt Romney is less deplorable. I mean, Ted Cruz is... he's just horrible. He's a Tea Partier, so he's even more of a horrible human being than Mitt Romney is. Mitt Romney's definitely no fan of that right-wing asshat either. In USA Today, you can find Wisconsin GOP, Senator Ron Johnson warning about the debt burden we are placing on our children. Independent Senator Angus King of Maine, he caucuses with the Democrats, is anxious about increasing the national debt we will leave to our children and grandchildren. Now, this doesn't make... Oh, you fucking... Tea Party means classic English liberal values. The Tea Party is far, far right. Classic English liberal values would be Democrats, right? Because Democrats are your conservatives, roughly over there in Britain. Early 1800. Oh, okay. Well, fuck that. Don't care about that. Interesting, but fuck that. Tea Party can go fuck itself. And every single one of them. And this goes far beyond politicians. It's soaked into American culture. The AARP bulletin once featured 2 newborns on its cover with a headline declaring them to be $156,000 in debt. An article in the Christian Post instructs us that we used to take pride in paying our own way. Now we have no problem sponging off anyone, including our grandchildren. Oh, this is fucking ridiculous. Why do I prefer coffee? I don't drink coffee. I don't like coffee. Don't like beer. I'm mostly water. Well, like right now I'm drinking a Smirnoff Ice screwdriver. That's why I don't like Tea Party? No, Tea Party is horrific. They are bad human beings, and they should feel bad. Not to be completely judgmental or anything. Because they do. They feel really good, though. If you have bad values, sure, anything can feel good. Even, serial killers feel good when they're doing their thing, right? This sounds awful until you think about it for 5 seconds. Instead of panicking about the blighted future we're leaving to our progeny, ask whom our children are going to have to repay. The answer is our children. Every time the federal government sells a bond, it creates a liability for the government, but also creates an asset for those who bought the bond in exactly the same amount. For American society overall, the entire process is, financially speaking, largely a wash. For details on why it's not completely washed, see below. Okay, so this gets into MMT, and I've got some basics on that sort of a thing here. If you want to learn a little bit more about it, I've got a whole bunch of stuff here. It's not complete, but I spent like 2 weeks doing some research on it. Ultimately, right, because the bonds are in U.S., people who work for the government shouldn't be allowed to vote. That's interesting. Okay, why? Because it's like, yeah, okay, that's kind of, you know, they have a self-vested interest in making things better for themselves. Well, what? Well, okay, so they should be able to vote. The primary issue really should be they should not be able to vote on their own, you know, their pension, on their pay. That stuff should be left to the public in general, because right now they, you know, Congress has given itself, you know, pay increase after pay increase while leaving the American people with nothing, as they always do. Or more specifically, what I put in my policies is that their pay should be tied directly to the economic, tied to the conditions of your constituency. We're talking what levels the inequality, what levels the pollution, poverty, right, employment, wealth inequality, income inequality, and all that sort of stuff. Should start as a base. Start as a base of $70,000, and then going up or down based on how well your community is actually doing. Something to that effect. Every time the federal government sells a bond, okay, we read that. Okay, it is true that this could create problems with inequality. Government bonds, like financial assets in general, are disproportionately owned by the wealthy. Right, and this is one of the issues with bonds, right? That much like stocks, 80% of stocks are owned by the top 20% of the people in this country. Bonds are going to be very similar as well. Only those people who have a lot of spare cash lying around can invest in bonds, and that of course is going to be the top, you know, 10%, 20%, 30%, while the rest of us have jack shit. To understand what this means in concrete terms, consider Blackburn and all of her anxious statements about the danger of government debt. Blackburn's financial disclosure report states that she and her husband have hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in various mutual funds. Most mutual funds invest in various degrees in U.S. government bonds. Blackburn had a son and daughter, and if they inherit these mutual funds, part of that inheritance will almost certainly be indirect ownership of government bonds. In other words, while she frets in public about a debt burden on our grandchildren and our children and grandchildren, her children will likely be benefiting from this debt burden. In the future, money will flow from the U.S.'s children in general to her kids specifically. Right, and the bonds aren't there's nothing wrong with these, because it's Congress makes them available, and then it just gets paid. It just magically gets paid. It's just that simple. Of course, it doesn't have the same ring to it. Say, I'm desperately worried about the deficit spending all day will force everyone else's kids to pay for my kids' future. Right, exactly. And deficit spending, when it comes to deficit spending, a government deficit is a private surplus. So you basically have to have a government deficit. If the government is not running in deficit, your economy is basically going to be trashed. That's just the way it's going to be. Because every time we haven't had a deficit, like Obama and Clinton had surpluses, that triggered a recession, because that pulled more money out of the private sector into the government, and therefore they had to pull into their savings, take out of their retirement and stocks and all that sort of stuff to pay all this other stuff. So you want a government deficit which puts money into people's savings and gives people money to spend, and that's how you grow your economy. This would raise the question of why, if future Americans see this as a problem, they wouldn't be able to just raise taxes on Blackburn's children. The answer, of course, is that they will be able to do that if they want, thereby extinguishing most issues regarding deficit spending in the present. There's somewhat more to it, though. Not a lot. Not all government bonds are purchased by Americans. Right now, about 1/3 of U.S. government debt is held by foreigners. The Treasury Department updates who has how much every month. Right now, Japan and China have about a little over $1 trillion in U.S. treasuries. For complex, confusing reasons, however, this is almost certainly a good thing. That typically has to deal with trade imbalances. The U.S. has been running a trade deficit since the 1980s. That is, we're buying more from other countries than we're selling to them. In order to finance the difference, we have to give foreigners American assets. These assets can be anything: cash or government bonds or stock in American companies. At the same time, the U.S. has also been accumulating foreign assets. Foreigners now own $46.25 trillion in such U.S. assets, while the U.S. owns $32.16 trillion in foreign assets. The gap between these two amounts, $14.9 trillion, is essentially the accumulated difference between what we've bought and what we've sold. On its face, this would seem to be a significant problem for the U.S., inexorably leading to large outflows of money to other countries. Strangely, though, this is not happening. Investments in stock generally earn higher returns than investments in bonds, particularly government bonds, and U.S. assets are disproportionately in foreign stock, while foreigners invest more in U.S. bonds. Because of this, the U.S.'s smaller amount of foreign assets consistently earn a greater return than the larger amount of U.S. assets held by foreigners. Thus, rather than money flowing out of the U.S., it is still flowing into the country. More detail about this strange state of affairs can be found in a recent report from the Brookings Institution. The upshot is that, if anything, we should want foreigners to be investing more in low-yielding U.S. government bonds, because this means that they're not buying higher-yielding American stocks. So Cruz, Blackburn, Johnson, King, and the rest of the huge anti-deficit spending army can stand down. Government debt simply is not a terrifying boogeyman for our descendants to fear, or even much of a problem at all. If our grandchildren end up hating us, it's much more likely because we failed to give them the excellent educations, or create a functioning healthcare system, or prevent global warming from destroying a livable biosphere. Amen to that. Those will be true burdens on them, the ones that we can prevent by wisely spending lots of money today. That's exactly right. Exactly right. So we're at 38. All right, we'll pop over here and we'll try this one on austerity, because austerity is always a fun thing to talk about, right? World Bank loves it. IMF loves it. Good times. Good times. All right, this is from May 17th. The real purpose of austerity. Even if everyone agreed that printing another $1 trillion to finance a basic income for the poor would boost neither inflation nor interest rates, the rich and powerful would still oppose it. After all, their most important interest is not to conserve economic potential, but to preserve the power of the few to compel the many. That's right. Austerity is about increasing inequality by taking from the peasants, the 99%, and giving it to the 1%. Austerity is always economic warfare, and it's basically never needed. Back in the 1830s, Thomas Peel decided to migrate from England to Swan River in Western Australia. Man of means, Peel took along, besides his family, 300 persons of working class men, women, and children, as well as means of subsistence and production to the amount of $50,000. But soon after arrival, Peel's plans were in ruins. The cause was not disease, disaster, or bad soil. Peel's labor force abandoned him, got themselves plots of land in the surrounding wilderness, and went into business for themselves. Although Peel had brought labor, money, and physical capital with him, the workers' access to alternatives meant that he could not bring capitalism. Karl Marx recounted Peel's story in Capital, Volume 1 to make the point that capital is not a thing, but a social relation between persons. The parable remains useful today in illuminating not only the difference between money and capital, but also why austerity, despite its illogicality, keeps coming back. For now, austerity is out of fashion. With government spending like there's no tomorrow, or rather, to ensure that there is a tomorrow, fiscal spending cuts to rein in public debt do not rank high among political priorities. U.S. President Joe Biden's unexpectedly large and popular stimulus and investment program has pushed austerity further down the agenda. But like mass tourism and large wedding parties, austerity is lingering in the shadows, ready for a comeback, egged on by ubiquitous chatter about impending hyperinflation and crippling bond yields unless governments re-embrace it. There's little doubt that austerity is based on faulty thinking and a faulty understanding, of course, of how the actual federal fiscal policy works. Leading to self-defeating policy. The fallacy lies in the failure to recognize that, unlike a person, family, or company, government cannot bank on its income being independent of its spending. If you and I choose to save money that we could have spent on new shoes, we'll keep that money. But this way of saving is not open to the government. If it cuts spending during periods of low or falling private spending, then the sum of private and government spending will decline faster. Okay, this sum is national income. For most governments, for governments pursuing austerity, spending cuts mean lower national income and fewer taxes. Unlike a household or business, if the government cuts its spending during tough times, it is cutting its revenues too. But if austerity is such a bad idea, sapping our economies of energy, why is it so popular among the powerful? One explanation is that while the wife is making noise. While they recognize that state spending on the impecunious masses is an excellent insurance policy against recession, as well as against threats to their property, they are loath to pay the premium taxes. This is probably true. Nothing unites oligarchs more than hostility to taxes, but it does not explain staunch opposition to the idea of spending central bank money on the poor. Yeah, they don't like taxes, but they also don't like spending money on the poor as well. This more has to do with class warfare, right? Because there's a level of sociopathy involved with inequality and people who are rich. So fuck the poors. Let's bilk them for more because we can. If you asked economists whose theories align with the interests of the wealthiest 0.1%, why they oppose monetary financing of redistributive policies that benefit the poor, their answer would hinge on inflation fears. The more sophisticated would go a little further. Such largesse would eventually hurt its intended beneficiaries because interest rates would soar. Immediately, the government, facing higher debt repayments, would be forced to cut its expenditures, and almighty recession would then ensue, hitting the poor first and foremost. Well, we can really take a look at that and look at those times in U.S. history when we've done that and see what the result was. I mean, like following World War II, right? FDR, right? Eisenhower, whichever one, spent shitloads of money is one of the most productive times in U.S. history. This is not the place for yet another rendition of that debate. But suppose for a moment, and for argument's sake, that everyone spending wisely means spending on education, especially in areas that will most likely be private. Yeah, and that's the way it should be. I mean, education, like I say, my policy is something that should never ever be cut, only ever increased. But here in the U.S., we're not into spending wisely because that doesn't make corporations and the rich lots of money in the short term. That's that tension problem, right? Spending it, quote, wisely, as you're talking about, would be, yes, universal healthcare, universal education, all these things that are super expensive on capital outlays, but have a high return on investment for society at large, and even for companies. But that's a long-term return on investment, and that's not what corporations and the rich want to look at. They need short-term return on investment while also engaging class warfare as a part of that process. For some U.S. companies that spend their money, yeah, of course. I mean, there's always some out there that do that, right? I mean, there's always some, but we're talking federal policy is where it really needs to be, where it needs to start, because that's where the most of the work can be done on these sorts of, quote, wise spending, because of course, the sheer scope of the amount of money that they can spend and the scope of the people that they can affect, meaning everyone in the country. We're already seeing evidence of this. The United States employers are reporting that they cannot find workers as pandemic lockdown rules are lifted. What they really mean is that they cannot find workers who will work for the pittance on offer. The Biden administration's extension of $300 weekly supplementary payment to the unemployment has meant that the combined benefits workers receive are more than twice the federal minimum wage. Okay, we'll raise the fucking minimum wage, which Congress refused to lift because, of course, they didn't. Short employers are experiencing something akin to what happened to Peel after he arrived in Swan River. Spend a huge amount on AI research. Yeah, of course. Big tech, they do spend a lot of money on AI research, definitely. But of course, all that is going to be primarily proprietary, and it's not going to, be, quote, wise spending, because if it was open sourced, right, and was available to everyone, that would be, quote, wise spending, but it's not going to be. Sure, it's good stuff to invest in, but it doesn't benefit the masses. They do a bit, but not enough for it to really, not as much as they should. Like, Google needs to be all open source. Microsoft needs to be all open source. All needs to be open source. All of it. If I'm right, Biden is now facing an impossible task because of the way financial markets decoupled after 2008 from actual capitalist production. Every level of fiscal stimulus that he chooses will be both too little and too much. It will be too little because it will fail to generate good jobs in sufficient numbers, and it will be too much because, given many corporations' low profitability and higher debt, even the slightest increase in interest rates will cause a cascade of corporate bankruptcies and financial market tantrums. Okay, let them all fail. Again, so raise minimum wage, $15 an hour. Federal jobs guarantee, UBI. Get rid of, go to universal healthcare, universal education, and just run with it. The only way to overcome this conundrum is to rebalance both the financial markets and the real economy, is to lift working class American income substantially and write off much of the debt. For example, student loans, that keeps them bogged down. But because this would empower the majority and raise the specter of Peel's fate, the rich and powerful will prefer to return to good old austerity. After all, their most important interest is not to conserve economic potential, it is to preserve the power of the few to compel the many. Right. It's economic warfare. Class warfare. Raising minimum wage, is that spending money wisely if you look at it from an economic point of view? Yes, of course, because whenever you raise the minimum wage, that raises people at the bottom up and increases local spending and businesses grow. Yes, most definitely. Raising minimum wages is a good idea. And there are some companies that were bitching about it, right, in like Seattle, and now they've grown so much they've opened up like 2 or 3 other stores. I mean, the raising minimum wage lifts the entire economy up, period. Everyone spends more, businesses do more business, then they hire more, then they grow, they expand. All right, I got 10 minutes left. And we'll go through this one. Then people start spending foreign products because Chinese stuff is cheaper. It would benefit. Oh, it can, sure, but that's a policy decision made by the U.S. government to allow that to be a thing, right? I mean, that was a policy choice. That's something they can fix, but they choose not to because that's how, the corporations make more money by buying and selling cheap shit, cheap garbage. All right, electric car sharing takes off on Minnesota streets. This is interesting. How you doing today, Anaholics? How's your week or so been? Doing great? Good. Good to hear. Well, we don't need to force them to buy U.S. stuff. I'm glad you're doing well, man. Glad you're doing well. Oh, how was your second shot? You got your second vaccine shot, right? I don't know if we covered this last time, but I got wrecked from it. Completely wrecked on day 2. So yeah, it would be nice, of course, for Americans to buy American stuff. That's something that can be dealt with through U.S. policy to prevent that sort of thing. June 12th? Oh, okay. So you're coming up. Yeah, dude, I got wrecked. I had 102-degree fever. I was in bed all day. My whole body was sore. It was bad. It was bad. So I got my shot at like 10:30 in the morning on Monday. And it was fine. It was like the first one on the first day, and that was fine. But sometime in the night, I just wrecked. All of Tuesday, I was just destroyed. Yeah, I didn't have any problems with the first shot either. That was easy. In the second one, yeah, day 2 I was wrecked, and then day 3 I felt okay. I still had that brain fog going on and stuff, but after that day 3 I was just fine. It's just that second day that was the killer. It was killer, man. Moderna? You guys have got Pfizer, right? Yeah, Pfizer, yeah. Yeah, both the wife and I were wrecked from it. We got them at the same time. Yeah, Tuesday was rough. Tuesday was super rough. But yeah, Wednesday was much better. So I hope yours goes better than mine did. Because that was not fun. Definitely was not fun. You're probably gonna have to get booster shots too. At some point. They said probably sometime in the fall or something like that. I've got some articles here talking about the mRNA ones work fairly well against the two main variants. I should have maximum protection then. Yeah, it takes what 2 to 3 weeks following the second one to get your immune system up and running. Yeah, I'm at the end of week. What the hell is this? What the hell is this? I don't know what this is. Okay. So yeah, I think this is the end of my second week right now. Yeah, because I got it last Monday's when I had my shot. So this is the end of the second week. Yeah. So I might go back into the office after next week. I have to figure out when my daughter gets off school, and then I'll probably go back into work then. So it should be at the beginning of June. So after next week, hopefully. That'll be good. It'll be good to get back into work. Have my 3 screens because I don't have my 3 screens here to work. I've got my laptop. It'll be good to get back in. So good. Actually, I'm not going to cover this. Yeah, I'm not going to cover this. We'll stop here for today. All right. Oh my god, dude. At work I had 2, then I got my new laptop like last year or the year before, and I had 3 screens. Oh my god, dude. It's the first time I didn't feel cramped. Okay, how big is your screen? That's the question, because you're fancy. You have like a 48-inch. Yeah, I'm onto you. Yeah, I had 3 of them. Yeah, see, there we go, Mr. Fancy Pants. Yeah, that'd probably be okay too. I could get by with that. But for me, when I work, first time I had 3 monitors. It's the first time I actually felt like I had space to work. I could actually breathe, and it was nice. It was so nice. At home, I only have 2. They're bigger monitors, and it works out okay. I would still like to get something that's slightly bigger for these 2 monitors. I only have space for 2. I think I have a 22 and a 24. I'd like to get like 2 27s or something like that. Get myself a little more space, which would be nice. All right, so I'm going to close up just a little bit early. So we'll make this the first call for any random thoughts, comments, or anything before we call this a day. Yeah, good night to you too, man. Thanks for showing up, man. I appreciate it. I gotta survive tomorrow, then I've got stream again on Saturday. Yeah. All right, so yeah, man, thanks so much for showing up. I appreciate it. You're always fun. Have a great rest of your week, and then it's 2 a.m. Oh, Jesus Christ. That is late. Well, go to bed, dude. Seriously, go to bed. Get some sleep. And then 6 hours, Jesus. I wish I could get by in 6 hours. I would kill. I would get so many more. I would get like 3 to 4 hours a day extra to get stuff done. That would just be amazing. So you do something productive for me tomorrow, because I can't do that. So yeah, have a great week, and we'll see you guys later. If you like what you see here, you can follow. I'm on Twitch, Facebook, Discord, all the stuff's down there. You can support me on Patreon too. That's a thing. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Bye, Alex. Bye.